The search warrant. The search warrant is the key to obtaining cell phone records. Cell phone records, especially with tower information, are the property of the carrier and not the customer. Most of the time, carriers will not release the call detail records without proper legal demand, even with the consent of the customer. In this module, we will cover the affidavit, the order or warrant, and specific language for AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon. Cell phone record search warrants are like any other search warrants. They have two parts, the affidavit of probable cause and the order or warrant. The affidavit must contain a crime. It must have probable cause, must tie the phone number to the case, and identify all the information sought. The order or warrant must include the phone company where the search is to be performed, and all information sought must appear in both the affidavit and the warrant. The affidavit. The affidavit for probable cause for a search warrant for cell phone records must show the same components of any other search warrant. It must contain the elements of a crime, show probable cause to believe this crime was committed, show the involvement of the phone number for which we are requesting information, and specifically identify all the information we would like from the carrier and why it is valuable. Here's an example of a probable cause affidavit. Tell the story. Tell the known facts about the crime. Make sure to include the elements of the crime even if the suspect is unknown. For example, in Indiana, the elements of murder state that a person knowingly or intentionally kills another human being. If we state in the affidavit that the police arrived to find a victim suffering from a gunshot wound from which he later died, and there was no evidence the wound was self-inflicted, we have met the elements of murder, even though we haven't identified a suspect. Tie the phone to the murder case. Tying the phone to the murder case may be as simple as identifying the victim's phone number. We would certainly like to know the phone numbers associated with the last calls and text messages before the victim died. Later in the investigation, we may want to get search warrants for these numbers. A judge will usually find probable cause, since these were the last numbers to communicate with the victim's phone before he died. List the location to be searched. The location to be searched is simply the carrier. It would look something like the records of the Sprint Corporation. List what we would like to obtain from the carrier. The information we would like to obtain will vary depending on the phone company. For example, different companies provide different cell site locations for different types of communication. Verizon provides cell site for voice only. Sprint provides cell sites for voice and data. T-Mobile provides cell sites for voice and text, and AT&T provides cell sites for all three. It doesn't hurt to request cell site locations for text messages from Verizon, but we won't get it. We will go into what we want to ask from each carrier in detail later in the course. Justify why we want the information. We need to tell why we think the information would be valuable to the investigation and what we hope to learn. For example, if we are requesting the records for a known suspect, the cell tower information would likely put the phone in the area of the crime scene. Order or warrant. The order or warrant is composed of two parts, the header and the body. The header format may vary by jurisdiction, but it should include the following information. There should be some way of identifying the case. We can use either the name or the user of the phone or unknown if we don't know the user. State the phone number. Identify the location to be searched, which is usually read located at and the name of the phone company. Note the time frame for the search and the time zone. The time zone is important because AT&T and T-Mobile provide the times for their records in Universal Time Coordinated, or UTC. UTC is either 4 or 5 hours ahead of Eastern Time, depending on daylight savings time. If we mention only the dates and don't mention the time zone, we may lose 4 or 5 hours at the end of our records because the carrier will provide the dates based on UTC. We may lose even more records for Pacific Time, which is 7 or 8 hours behind UTC. The body should include the language, having found probable cause for the issuance of this search warrant. Federal Criminal Code 18 U.S.C. 2703 requires the carriers to provide the phone records upon proper legal demand showing specific and articulable facts. Any search warrant will contain probable cause, which is a higher threshold than specific and articulable facts, but the phone companies won't necessarily receive a copy of the probable cause affidavit. The attorneys for the phone companies may have instructed the analysts not to release the records without probable cause, or at least proof of an affidavit supporting the warrant. Some phone companies release information with subpoenas, and subpoenas don't always require supporting affidavit. Including the language, having found probable cause for the issuance of this warrant, will make it clear to the phone companies that the judge has seen the specific and articulable facts supporting the warrant. I've had a few carriers refuse my search warrants until I started using this language. Ensure that the requested information is the same as the information listed in the affidavit. The affidavit supports and justifies the warrant. We can't put information in the warrant unless we first list and justify it in the affidavit. Request that the carrier preserve the records. Our ultimate goal is to present this information in court if the case makes it to trial. Most jurisdictions will require certification of records. We may receive the records in digital format through email or download. Receiving the records in this way is fine for the investigation, but for the courts to admit the records in some jurisdictions, we need a CD containing the records signed by the analyst, along with an affidavit of custodian of records. A detective managing many cases with phone records may not have the time to chase down the certification for every set of records. Only a small percentage of the records will ever make it into court, and at the time of the warrant, it is impossible to predict whether or not the records will be valuable. Obtaining the certification may fall upon the prosecutor or district attorney as he or she prepares for trial. Including the request for preservation of records in the warrant will ensure that the records are available for reproduction and certification in preparation for trial. Request the records in digital format. Carriers tend to provide records in reams of printed paper if we don't specifically request the records in digital form. Carriers tend to send paper records if we are asking for a short time period where the printed records are small enough to put in an envelope. Digital records are much easier and faster to analyze. We could analyze the printed records, but it would take a great deal of time with a lot of highlighting, notes, and collation. Here's an example of a search warrant, though a search warrant in your jurisdiction may look a little bit different. Each company requires slightly different language. We'll go through the language for the 4 major phone companies with national coverage: AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon. Most phones run on one of these 4 networks. For example, Boost and Virgin run on the Sprint network, Cricket runs on AT&T, and TracFone uses different networks in different areas. These smaller networks are Mobile Virtual Network Operators, or MVNO. The communication records reside in the records of the major carriers, while the subscriber information and account information resides in the records of the MVNO. In the case when we know the phone is an MVNO, we should mention both the MVNO and the major carrier in the warrant. Most of the time, however, our initial search of the phone number will only reveal the major carrier, and the records we receive from the major carrier will instruct us to go to the MVNO for subscriber information. That will require a second warrant. There are also smaller providers that own cell sites. An example is Bluegrass Wireless, which owns cell sites in the Bowling Green, Kentucky area. When a Bluegrass Wireless phone roams away from its network, it usually uses Verizon or Sprint networks. AT&T. AT&T includes Cricket. Address warrants for Cricket phones to AT&T Wireless. AT&T will include cell site information with the subpoena, but I recommend a search warrant. Search warrant returns tend to be quite a bit faster than subpoenas. Here's the preferred language for AT&T search warrants. Subscriber information to include name, address, and identifying information, such as date of birth, driver's license, and social security number. Include contact information, such as email address and contact phone number. The contact phone number may be different from the cell phone number. Billing and credit card information. The method of payment and source, credit card numbers, electronic funds transfers, locations of cash payments, and any credit report run by the provider. Service information, such as purchase and activation location, types of service subscribed, additional phone numbers on the same account, and the make, model, and serial numbers, the ESN, IMEI, or MEID of the phone. The ESN is the electronic serial number. The IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment Identity. IMSI is the International Mobile Subscriber Identity. And MEID is Mobile Equipment Identifier. ESN generally is not used anymore. IMEI and IMSI are generally specific to GSM phones, and the MEID is generally specific to CDMA phones. The call detail records include cellular voice calls, SMS, MMS messages, data communications, and tower locations, along with the azimuth for the sectors. SMS stands for Short Message System, and MMS stands for Multimedia Message System. SMS messages are limited to 160 characters and generally go through the phone system, whereas MMS messages are not limited to 160 characters and can include photographs or videos and generally go through the data system. The LAC, or local area code, is a group of cell towers, usually in a geographic location, and this is usually specific to GSM networks. The SID, cell ID, is an individual cell location, including the sector. This again is usually specific to GSM networks. Ask for the content of the AT&T cloud, such as SMS messages, MMS messages, and email communications. MMS messages will not show up on the phone records for AT&T, but they may be contained in the cloud. I haven't had a great deal of success in getting information from the AT&T cloud because most users of iPhones choose to use the iCloud and Android users use Google Drive. But it's better to ask for something and not get it than to potentially miss something valuable. The location of the phone. Ask for the Network Event Location System, or NELOS, and the Mobile Locator Tool. Include a request for location accuracy. With these systems, AT&T attempts to provide the exact location of the phone at the time of a call. Request voicemail messages, including content. A list of all AT&T cell towers with latitude, longitude, address, and sector directions. A detailed definitions page. Preserve the records and provide the results in the appropriate time zone. Lastly, provide the records in digital format. AT&T tends to provide their digital records in PDF format. Additionally, request that AT&T provide the records in .txt format. The PDF records do not easily import into Excel, but the .txt records do. Sprint. Sprint includes both Boost and Virgin. Address search warrants for Boost and Virgin records to the Sprint Corporation. Sprint will only honor a search warrant for records that include cell site locations. Here's the language for Sprint search warrants. Include subscriber information expanded to include name, address, and identifying information such as date of birth, driver's license number, and social security number. Request the subscriber information, including contact information, email address, contact phone numbers, which might be different from the cell phone number. Include billing and credit information or payment information, the method and source of payment, credit card numbers, electronic funds transfers, and location of cash payments. Request the credit information, any credit report run by the provider. Service information, including purchase and activation location, types of service, additional phone numbers on the account, make, model, and serial number, ESN, IMEI, or MEID, call detail records, including cellular calls, SMS, MMS messages, data communications, specifically IPDR with cell site, website address report, tower locations, including the NEID, cell number, sector number, eNode, and azimuth for sectors. The IPDR is the Internet Protocol Detail Report. The NEID is the Network Element Identifier, which is the switch and a specific term to Sprint. The eNode is Evolved Node, and that is generally the cell site location in LTE networks. Request voicemail messages, stored voicemail reproduction. Request PCMD, the per call measurement data. This is precise location information, just like the NELOS from AT&T. A list of all Sprint cell towers with latitude, longitude, address, and sector directions. Again, request the records be preserved and provide them in digital format. T-Mobile. T-Mobile also includes Metro PCS. Address search warrants for Metro PCS to Metro PCS/T-Mobile USA. T-Mobile will only honor search warrants or court orders for cell site information. Here's the specific language for T-Mobile search warrants. Includes subscriber information, name, address, identifying information such as date of birth, driver's license number, and social security number. Contact information such as email addresses and contact phone numbers, which again may be different from the cell phone number. Billing and credit card information, including method and source of payment, credit card numbers, electronic funds transfers, locations of cash payments, and any credit report run by the provider. Service information, such as the purchase and activation location, the types of service, additional phone numbers on the account, and the make, model, and serial numbers of the phone, such as ESN, IMEI, or MEID. Request the call detail records, including cellular calls, SMS or MMS messages, data communications, and tower locations, including LAC-SID, eNode, and azimuths for the sectors. A list of all T-Mobile cell towers with latitude, longitude, address, and sector directions. Voicemail messages, including content. A detailed definitions page. Again, preserve the records, provide them in the proper time zone, and provide them in digital format. Verizon. Verizon will honor a subpoena for cell site information, but I recommend a search warrant or court order as it will return faster and there is less chance Verizon will challenge it. Here's the language for Verizon warrants. Include the subscriber information, including name, address, and identifying information such as date of birth, driver's license number, or social security number. Request contact information, such as email address and contact phone numbers that may be different from the cell phone number. Billing and credit card information to include method and source of payment, credit card numbers, electronic funds transfers, and locations of cash payments. Also include any credit report run by the provider, payment activity, payment history, and auto bill copy. Include service information such as purchase and activation location, types of service, additional phone numbers on the account, make, model, and serial numbers, the ESN, IMEI, and MEID. Request the call detail records, cellular calls, cell site incoming and outgoing, SMS and MMS messages, historical MMS detail, text message detail, auto text message content, auto picture content, auto picture detail, and picture message detail. Data communications, including IP destination and IP session. Tower locations, including the switch or element, cell numbers, sector numbers, and azimuth for sectors. Also request any data in the Verizon cloud services, such as SMS messages, MMS messages, or email communications. Like AT&T, I've had little success in obtaining information from the Verizon cloud, but I'd rather ask for something and not get it than potentially miss something important. Also request RTT, or round trip time, to include reliability factors. Voicemail messages, including content, a voicemail password reset. A list of all Verizon cell towers with latitude, longitude, address, and sector directions. A detailed definitions page, and preserve the records. Provide the records in digital format.